I'm not a voter in New York City, and so I have no dog in that fight. And everything that I've read on him, I don't really agree with virtually any of it politically. So that's just where I'm at as a Democrat. I mean, he's not even a Democrat, honestly.
Lefty that we've talked a fair bit about on this show is the Democrat nominee for the mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani. Some of his radical socialist policies include city-run grocery stores, higher taxation. He said billionaires just shouldn't exist, full stop. But what is so perplexing about the case of Zohran Mamdani is that 1 in 3 of the wealthiest residents of New York actually supported him. The people who he says should not exist, the millionaires he is waging war against, surprisingly supported Mamdani in significant numbers. He's got a group called the Mamdani Millionaires, comprised of young venture capitalists and law firms who've donated surprisingly large amounts to his campaign thus far. And what really gets me is one of these venture capitalists, 27-year-old young urban professionals, said, I just think we should pay our fair share of tax. Sure, you should, but give your money away voluntarily. That is the moral thing to do. Voting for socialism will only hurt the city. So I don't know what it is with these self-loathing rich people. If you feel so convicted about your obscene levels of wealth, there's an easy way to fix that. Give it to us. We'll take it.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's self-loathing. And where did they learn to be so self-loathing? University, maybe. These are not just millionaires. Typically, they are young millionaires, as you said, who've made their money through the tech industry and now using their money to promote socialism, would you believe? JD Vance points out the contradictions, not just with these supporters of Mamdani who are millionaires, but with the left in general. And JD Vance points out that he used to think the inherent contradictions within the left would cause the left to come undone. And yet, strangely, the left just keeps growing and growing in strength This is an interesting little monologue he gives, and then he answers the question as to why the contradictions within leftism don't actually matter to leftists.
I may not speak for many of you, but I was once comforted by these contradictions within the modern left. How could privileged whites march around with a straight face decrying white privilege? How could progressives pretend to love conservative Muslims despite those Muslims' views on gender and sexuality? But the answer is obvious if you think about it. And it's a very, very dangerous and very sad answer. The radicals of the far left, they don't need a unifying ideology of what they're for because they know very well what they're against.
And so the unifying thing amongst leftists, Joe, he says, is hate. They hate the West, they hate conservatism, they hate tradition, they don't have a vision for the future, they simply want to dismantle everything. And if you dismantle everything because of your Muslim beliefs, I dismantle everything because of my queer gender theory beliefs, and you want to dismantle everything because you're a communist, even though we might disagree, our enemy, capitalism, the Western system, we have that in common, and so we band together. Thus, the contradictions don't really matter. We're aligned against Western civilization.
But do you know how they reconcile their views on, say, gender and sexuality with their support for conservative Muslims? By this. By walking the Orientalism tightrope, how Muslim Americans construct their gender ideology. And it's true. You drown what is, obviously bleedingly obvious to blind Freddie, to ordinary working people, and we'll actually get to this, in absolute gobbledygook, in absolute elitist, esoteric garbage. And these are the people who are perpetuating the socialist revolution. Again, it's not poor people. There's this idea that socialism is for or of poor people. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is something that is devised again and again by the upper middle class, by people like these academics at the University of Chicago or the University of Texas or whatever, who go to these socialism conferences and tell each other what they're going to do to fix society. The people who wrote the Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, they were the most elite microcosm of society. Karl Marx came from a family of lawyers who owned vineyards in the French countryside. Friedrich Engels, his family owned the factories in England that the Communist Manifesto was creating. He was the owner of them. And they produced this book called The Communist Manifesto that is supposed to, be a liberating tome for workers, these workers who they study like animals in a zoo. And you know what it turns into? So when the Soviet Union invaded Poland in 1939, because they did as well, just as the Nazis did, the Soviets invaded from the east, the soldiers would get all the Polish soldiers and civilians, they round them all up and they would look at their hands. And if they didn't have calloused, roughed up working man's hands, they were shot. Now, if Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels happened to be in the Polish army in 1939, they would have been taken out the back and shot as a result of their own ideological insanity. That tells you everything you need to know about socialism and communism.
Very well said.